Welcome to the story of Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. This thrilling legend unveils a mystical world where caves overflow with treasure and danger lurks behind every whispered secret. A tale of greed, wit, and bravery, where a single magical phrase can change destiny. Join us on this dramatic and captivating journey from the very first moment. Once upon a time, in a Persian city, there lived two brothers. The elder was named Casim, and the younger was Alibaba. The elder, being cunning, married a young and wealthy woman and naturally became the owner of a large shop. Meanwhile, Alibaba, who was not greedy, worked hard and lived frugally. So before long, he was able to buy 3 mules. One day, while Alibaba was cutting wood in a lush green forest, he suddenly heard some noises that caught his attention. At first, it was a faint sound, distant, then growing closer. He put his ear to the ground and clearly heard what sounded like horses' hooves approaching rapidly. Being gentle and avoiding trouble, Alibaba quickly climbed up a tall tree in the middle of the forest. Hidden among thick branches, he could observe everything clearly. How lucky he was! Just as he reached the treetop, he saw a terrifying sight. A group of men on horseback, armed with swords and spears, riding swiftly toward him. Their dark faces, eyes gleaming like polished bronze, and beards split like raven wings gave them away. They were bandits, and he wasn't wrong. When they reached a large rock right below the tree where Alibaba was hiding, they dismounted. The leader, a tall and muscular man, ordered them to remove the reins and take down the large bundles from the horses' backs. They slung the heavy bags over their shoulders, bending under the weight. They marched in a line right beneath Alibaba's perch. Exactly 40 men. No more, no less. Alibaba anxiously watched to see what they would do next. The thieves stopped and lined up in perfect order. The leader stood straight in front of the rock and shouted in a commanding voice, as if speaking to someone or something invisible. "Open, Sesame!" And suddenly, what a wonder! The solid rock in front of them split open like a secret door. One by one, the bandits entered the opening, each carrying his bundle. Soon after, the massive rock closed again, sealing perfectly as if it had never been split in two. Moments later, the rock opened once more and the 40 thieves emerged, their sacks now empty. Each man took his horse, fastened the reins, and mounted. After tying the sacks to their saddles, the leader turned toward the cave entrance and loudly shouted the magic words, "Close, Sesame." The giant rock sealed itself again as seamlessly as before. Then the entire band of 40 thieves rode off along the same path they had come. All these strange events happened within just a few minutes. The forest returned to its earlier silence. Alibaba was still in shock and awe. He stayed quietly in his hiding place, even though he longed to go check on his 3 mules. He thought to himself, if those fierce thieves suddenly remember something they left behind and return, my poor life would surely be in danger. So he remained in hiding, keeping a close eye on the thieves until their figures disappeared completely from sight. Only then did he cautiously climb down from the tree and go in search of his mules. But everything he had just seen and heard, especially the magic words, filled him with intense curiosity. He walked over to the large rock, and despite his usual timid nature, the woodcutter Alibaba boldly faced the stone and said, "Open, Sesame." As soon as he said the words, the giant rock split open wide before his eyes. Alibaba was so startled he almost turned and ran, but curiosity held him in place. Looking inside, he saw that the cave was not dark or frightening at all. Instead, it had a bright passageway that led directly to a spacious chamber, carved into a high-domed room within the rock. Daringly, he stepped a few paces into the cave. As soon as he did, the rock door closed behind him. Alibaba was terrified, but then he remembered the magic words that could open all doors. Feeling reassured, he turned his gaze to examine the objects stored within the cave. Alibaba saw that all along the cave walls, stacked high up to the vaulted ceiling, were countless precious goods. Expensive merchandise, silks and brocades, luxurious carpets piled up, bags of grain and chests, some filled with coins and silver ingots, others with gold coins and cast gold bars. On the ground lay scattered gold coins and jewels to such an extent that there was hardly a place to step without treading on treasure. Never in his life had Alibaba seen or even smelled real gold, so he stood there, dumbfounded, staring in awe. He guessed this was the accumulated loot of generations of thieves. How great a blessing from Allah to lead me to this place, he thought. From now on, I shall not live in poverty again, but I must use these ill-gotten gains wisely. Alibaba only took gold dinars, filling enough sacks to match the strength of his 3 mules. When he was done, he went to the cave's entrance and said, "Open, Sesame." Instantly, the stone doors swung open. He herded the 3 mules to the cave entrance, loaded the sacks onto their backs, and led them away. That day, he arrived home a bit late. At first, his wife was frightened when she unloaded the heavy sacks of gold coins, but when she heard the whole story, her joy was boundless. She helped her husband dig a hole to bury the treasure. Because there was so much gold, she ran over to Casim's house to borrow a measuring jar. Casim's wife, curious, smeared a bit of wax under the jar to find out what kind of grain Alibaba's household was measuring. When the jar was returned, she flipped it over, and to her shock, a gold dinar was stuck underneath. Immediately she shrieked and called her husband. Casim rushed over to Alibaba's house and demanded to know how he had come upon so much gold. He even threatened, "I will report you to the authorities and say you are in league with the thieves." So Alibaba had no choice but to confess the truth. He told Casim the magic words and explained the way to the treasure cave. Casim left at once without even a word of thanks. He was determined to claim the cave and all its gold for himself. At the break of dawn the next morning, Casim went into the forest, driving ahead of him more than 12 mules carrying huge chests meant for storing gold. He even planned to return again with even more mules, or, if needed, an entire caravan of camels. Before he left, the kind-hearted Alibaba offered to guide his brother to the treasure cave, but Casim and his wife gave him suspicious glares and refused his help. Following the path Alibaba had described, Casim soon reached the foot of the great rock. He immediately recognized it. The surface was smooth and a large tree stood above it. He raised his hands and shouted, "Open, Sesame!" Instantly, the rock split open. After tying his mules to the tree, Casim stepped into the cave and the stone door closed behind him. Casim was immediately dazzled by the treasure, the gold dinars, the jewels, all scattered in heaps inside the cave. His greed grew even stronger at the sight of this priceless hoard. He told himself that next time he would organize a proper expedition to haul away the entire treasure. For now, he would just fill sacks with gold coins, enough to load 10 mules. Once finished, he headed back to the passage leading to the stone door and shouted loudly, "Open, Barley!" But Casim, blinded by greed, had forgotten the magic words to open the door. He kept shouting the wrong phrase, "Open, Barley! Open, Barley!" But the rock slab remained tightly shut. He called out again, "Barley, open up!" The rock slab didn't budge. He called again, "Beans, open up!" But still, there was not a single crack on the slab. Terrified, Casim gasped, "Buckwheat, open up! Millet, open up! Lima beans, open up! Corn, open up! Wheat, open up! Rice, open up!" But the stone door stayed firmly in place. Casim panicked, realizing he was trapped inside the cave because he had forgotten the magic words. He tried calling out every type of grain and seed he could think of, but the rock slab remained motionless, because the only seed that needed to be said was sesame, which Casim had forgotten. He strained his mind, trying to remember the magic words, but it was no use. In his dazed mind, the words had vanished. Both terrified and frustrated, he ran around the cave, searching for any opening to escape. But all around were sealed, smooth rock walls. Like a furious wild beast, he foamed at the mouth in rage and bit his fingers out of despair. At noon, the 40 thieves returned to the cave. In an instant, Casim was torn apart into 6 pieces. After killing Casim, the thieves gathered in a circle to discuss. They had no idea that Alibaba had been spying on them the day before, so they couldn't understand how someone had entered the cave. Unable to find an answer, they decided to set the matter aside for now and left together. It wasn't until that night that Casim's wife, worried that her husband hadn't returned, rushed to Alibaba's house to ask him to help find her husband's whereabouts. The next morning, Alibaba returned to the forest and collected Casim's remains, placing them into 2 sacks and loading them onto a mule to bring back. Alibaba's face looked so different that Casim's wife, upon seeing him, was about to burst out wailing. She was about to scratch her face, tear her hair, and rip her clothes. But Alibaba tactfully and gently told her the story of what had happened, calming her enough to stop her wailing that might have disturbed the neighbours and drawn public attention, not giving his sister, in-law, a chance to decide whether to continue crying. He quickly added, "God is infinitely generous. He has made me richer than I could ever need. Please let me merge what he has given me with what you have. I invite you to come live with me from now on. My wife will treat you like her own sister. That way, we will live peacefully together and remember the virtues of the deceased." Casim's wife recognized Alibaba's kindness and generosity. She agreed to live with Alibaba and his wife. Thanks to his clever thinking, Alibaba managed to suppress the noisy mourning and kept the whole incident a secret. Now, for the matter of announcing and burying Casim as if he had died naturally, Alibaba placed all his trust in the cleverness and intelligence of Morgiana, a slave girl whom he and his wife had raised since childhood and cared for like their own daughter. Morgiana did not betray her foster father's trust. As soon as she was given the task, she wasted no time and devised a plan to deal with the complicated situation. First, she spread the news that Casim had fallen seriously ill and ran to the pharmacy near their home to buy a dose of antidote typically used in critical cases. The next day, she returned to the pharmacy, her face soaked with tears, sighing heavily, to purchase a strong medicinal tonic normally reserved for severely ill patients. As she left, she lamented, "Oh, if this medicine doesn't work, my poor master is doomed." So at dawn the next morning, when the whole neighborhood was startled awake by loud wailing and mourning, everyone immediately assumed that Casim's wife, sister-in-law and relatives were announcing his passing. After arranging a reasonable cause of death, Morgiana then thought about how to sew the 6 pieces of Casim's body back into a complete corpse. There was only one way: to invite old Baba Mustafa, the man who specialized in sewing leather shoes. So, with a generous payment, Morgiana blindfolded the old man and led him to the cellar of her house to sew the 6 pieces of Casim's body into one whole. After that, she cleaned the reassembled body of Casim, applied fragrant oils, burned incense, and together with Alibaba, prepared the body for burial. Thus, no one had any idea about the true circumstances of Casim's death. 1 month later, the thieves returned to the cave. When they found no trace of Casim's body, they immediately realized that their hideout had been discovered, and they were determined to find the one who had uncovered their secret. One of the thieves volunteered to go investigate. He disguised himself as a foreign priest and made his way into the city. Luckily, on the very first day, he befriended the cobbler Baba Mustafa, who had sewn Casim's body back together. Baba Mustafa led him directly to Alibaba's house. The thief was overjoyed. He took a piece of white chalk he had brought with him and marked Alibaba's door. Then he slipped away back into the forest to inform the chief of his discovery. Meanwhile, Morgiana was returning from the market after buying food. She noticed the chalk mark on her door and stared at it thoughtfully. That mark did not appear here by accident, she thought. The hand that left it must be an enemy's. I must remove this harmful charm and lead it astray. With that, she ran to get a piece of white chalk and marked all the other doors on both sides of the street in exactly the same spot and manner. At dawn the next morning, the thieves entered the city 2 by 2, guided by the one who had marked the house. But they were thrown into confusion when they saw that every house on the street bore the exact same chalk mark. Following the chief's orders, they retreated to the forest to avoid attracting attention. Immediately, the thief who had marked the door was executed on the spot for his lack of caution. A second thief volunteered to go. This time, to avoid being discovered, he made a red mark on the door in a spot that few would notice, then quickly returned to the cave. But when the thieves arrived, led by him, they saw that every house had the same red mark. So when they got back to the cave, the second guide thief was beheaded just like the first. This was another triumph for Morgiana. Seeing the strange mark, she had again suspected trouble and repeated her clever trick from before. The chief of the thieves felt bitter about losing 2 of his bravest men. He thought carefully, then went into the city alone. Unlike the others, when Baba Mustafa showed him Alibaba's house, he didn't mark it. He simply observed it very carefully to remember it well, because from the outside, it looked just like the other houses on the street. After studying the house closely, he returned to the forest. One twilight evening, an oil merchant arrived in the city, bringing 38 jars of high-quality oil. The jars were carried in pairs on the backs of pack horses. They stopped in front of Alibaba's house. The merchant dismounted and respectfully said to the owner, "Sir, your humble servant is an oil merchant. I've arrived in this city with no place to stay and no acquaintances. I beg you, for the sake of God, to allow me and my horses to rest in your house until tomorrow morning." Hearing this, Alibaba felt compassion. Not only did he fail to recognize the thief chief in disguise, he even warmly welcomed him and offered lodging for him and the horses. The man led the horses into the stable. He gave each one a little hay and water, then whispered into each oil jar, "Stay hidden in there until you hear my whistle, then jump out and attack. Understood?" he said. He left the stable and went into the house. After eating and drinking his fill, the thief fell into a deep sleep to regain energy for his midnight attack with his men. Meanwhile, Morgiana was washing dishes in the kitchen. Suddenly, the lamp went out because it had run out of oil. Remembering the oil merchant guest, she thought he would not notice if she took a little oil. She took a small container out into the yard to fetch some oil. She approached one of the jars, opened the lid, and dipped her container in, only to be shocked when it struck something hard instead of oil. From inside the jar came a whispering voice. "Is it time?" someone inside the jar asked. "No, not yet," she whispered back. Morgiana checked all 38 oil jars and discovered that 37 of them held men inside, with only one containing oil. Why were these men hiding inside the oil jars? She did not understand, but she knew Alibaba was in danger. Thinking quickly, she wrapped some hay to light a fire. She opened one of the jars. "Step out quietly or you will be burned alive," she said. The man hiding inside the jar leapt out in fear and ran away. She went to each jar and repeated the same threat until all 37 men fled. A while later, the leader came out and whistled. All was silent. He checked the oil jars and realized they were all empty. Knowing his plan had been exposed, he leapt onto the top of the outer wall, sprang down into the street, and ran for his life. Back at his cave, he collapsed in exhaustion, thinking of ways to take revenge. Alibaba thanked Morgiana for her quick wit and bravery. His reward for her was a share in the store. In addition, he also hired guards to protect his family. The leader shaved his head and took a new name, Hassan. He opened a shop next to Alibaba's and soon became close to him. Alibaba did not pay attention to who Hassan really was. "Tonight, please come to my house for dinner," said Alibaba. "Nothing would make me happier," replied Hassan. Morgiana also joined the dinner. She noticed Hassan wearing a fine cloak, but he kept fiddling underneath it. She caught a flash of light. He was hiding a dagger. Morgiana recognized the man. He was the fake oil merchant. She had to do something to protect Alibaba. "Alibaba," she said, "I will dance to entertain your guest." She took some scarves and began to dance. She spun around Hassan's chair and used the scarves to tie him tightly. Morgiana pulled the dagger out from Hassan's cloak. "This man wants to harm you, Alibaba," she said. "He is none other than the fake oil merchant." Alibaba's guards seized Hassan and threw him into prison. When they returned, they reported a shocking truth to Alibaba. Hassan was the notorious leader of the 40 Thieves. At once, Alibaba understood everything. The leader had discovered that he had entered their cave, so he wanted to destroy Alibaba and his family for revenge. But he had failed thanks to Morgiana's cleverness. "Morgiana, you have saved my entire family," said Alibaba. "If it were you, you would have done the same," she replied. The chief of police came to visit Alibaba's house and said, "Many towns have suffered at the hands of this band of thieves, so a great reward was promised to whoever captured them. Now that you have done it, this reward belongs to you." Then the police chief handed Alibaba a very heavy bag of money. Alibaba took it and gave it all to Morgiana. "I want you to keep this money," he said. "I cannot keep it. This money will greatly improve your life. You could use it to open another shop," she replied. "My life is already good as it is. Money can never buy a friend as loyal as you. Take it and open your own shop." Morgiana accepted the bag of money and later opened a shop next to Alibaba's. She worked diligently and lived happily ever after. And so, thanks to their wit and courage, Alibaba and Morgiana triumphed over evil, safeguarding their family and peace. The true treasure was not only in the hidden cave, but also in love, loyalty, and integrity. The tale ends, leaving behind an eternal lesson. Justice always prevails. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons below. And remember to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next stories. Thank you so much, everyone.